Hey, what is going on, podcast people? Man, it is so great to see you back here on another Friday and, of course, another episode of Beyond the Broadcast. Man, what a phenomenal day it is down here in Kansas City. Beautiful day, beautiful weather, and, of course, we've got beautiful people just like you here on another edition of Beyond the Broadcast. Man, so excited for this episode because this is something new that I'm going to try out. And if it doesn't work, a few months down the road, then we stop it. That's the great thing about having a podcast, is that you kind of are in control of some of these things. So this special episodes that we're going to do every so often, we're calling it Beyond the Podcast. So it's not really a new podcast. It's just a special episode, special edition of the podcast that we're doing here today. So Beyond the Broadcast, of course, it is what it is. But Beyond the Podcast, we're talking more in depth about creating a podcast, more of a vlog style, I guess you could say. So a lot of this is going to be my own personal journey, vlogging my own journey through this new venture in life, and just having fun with it and teaching you guys some stuff along the ways that I have learned through podcasting, through social media, content creation, whatever it might be. Sharing what is going on. And it's just something I wanted to do as a solo episode. Aside from the normal interview styles that we do here on the show, this is just a way to be transparent with all of you. So if you like what we're doing here with Beyond the Podcast, please make sure you let us know in the comments below. Make sure you leave your likes, your comments, whatever. Engage however you want to engage. I'm not going to tell you one way or the other. If you want to dislike the video, that's fine. You have the freedom to do that. But here in today's episode, we are going to do a lot when it comes to podcasting. We're going to talk about starting your own podcast, what it takes to start your own podcast, and maybe just some things to expect coming in, because I think there's this layer of expectation with a podcast, right? Some people think it's going to start off and you're going to get all these great numbers and all these things are going to happen. But the reality is that's not really what happens, right? So you start a new podcast, you are starting from scratch. Here's what you can expect from my own personal experiences in college not too long ago, but also with this current experience that I'm going through at this current moment. To start out, I kind of want to just take a step back before we get into the podcast stuff and just allow me to reintroduce myself, because I think, from episode 1 all the way up till now, it's kind of been, just go and see what happens. And I really haven't had a chance to say, hi, hello, this is me. I'm Tyler. What's up? So my name's Tyler Brunner. Of course, I am the creator of Beyond the Broadcast and its main host. And this is a great, fun journey that I've been on. 7 episodes in with 7 different amazing guests. And we have a ton of interviews coming up in April. I think April is going to be one of the best months for the show by far. We have so many high-end guests coming on the show. 3 of them I've got confirmed so far for at some point in April. We've got coming up. I got one interview, I believe, next weekend. I've got an interview the weekend after that, and I got an interview at the end of April, I think beginning of May, one of those two. So there's a lot of interviews in the pipelines, and I'm so excited for y'all to meet my guests that are coming up. And of course, my guests aren't maybe well known to a lot of people, maybe people outside of my personal area of Kansas City. But these are people that I feel like can tell a really great story. And these are people that I think have garnered enough success within their own worlds to, I think, really be a valuable guest here on the show. Speaking of the show, Beyond the Broadcast, what is it all about? So I started Beyond the Broadcast because I had been in radio broadcasting for 7 years, including college. Enjoyed my time in radio broadcasting. I was always told from a young age that I should be using my voice as my career, or using my voice in my future career. And here I am. And I loved 7 years of radio broadcasting. I got my first job out of college in broadcasting. My last job I was there for 2.5 years doing sports radio broadcasting. And I kind of missed it. There was aspects that I missed, especially this personal connection that you get with the listener. That was something I missed. I really did. And so I knew I wanted to start up a podcast since leaving college, or since graduating, I should say. I did graduate. So since graduating from college, I knew I wanted to get back into this creative space. I'm kind of doing that right now. I'm in marketing as a main career, and now this is kind of my side thing that I do. So I knew I wanted to get back into this, this connection side. So I after graduating college, I knew I wanted to do a podcast, but I just wasn't too sure what, and I didn't know how to begin. I did podcasts in the past. Those were very scripted and very canned. So starting your own podcast where you're doing your own thing, and it's not for an assignment, there are no deadlines, is always difficult because you've got to keep yourself accountable. So that was the one biggest hurdle I had to get over. But once I got over that hurdle, it really has not been that hard. I mean, getting guests, of course, is hard. And coming up with new ideas and new things always is a difficult task, as that's the weekly thing. That's the weekly thing. Who's the next guest that we can interview? How do we get them? How many times do we need to reach out to them? You know what I mean? So those things have been difficult, but just starting has been one of the most difficult things. And that kind of leads in nicely into my first point here on Beyond the Podcast. And if you are sitting there wanting to start your own podcast, you want to do this thing, you want to get going, you want to get millions of subscribers like everyone else does, it starts with starting. It sounds as simple as it is, but it starts with starting. There's a quote, and I'm going to say a lot of these quotes because I listen to one podcaster mainly nowadays, and that's Chris Van Fleet. If you have not listened to Insight with Chris Van Fleet, you need to go do it, man. When I moved down here, I was listening to another marketing podcast, and I can't remember what it's called at this point, but I found Chris Van Fleet. I think I saw some of his interviews on YouTube Shorts or TikToks, one of the two. And I started listening to his podcast, and yes, mainly he interviews wrestlers and he talks about their stories and such, but he says a lot of really cool, he sprinkles in pieces of advice that I personally really love. And one of the quotes that really sticks with me and sticks with this process of starting a podcast is you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And I think that's so powerful. Just the fact that, you don't have to be perfect when starting a podcast. You do not have to have everything figured out. You don't have to have the most high-end camera. You don't have to have the most high-end PC. You just need to start. And really, it starts with this little thing in your pocket. I know it's weird to say that, but there's, especially in my timeline, since I've been growing up with YouTube back in 2005, just starting out, there are so many great apps, so many great recording apps, podcast platform apps that you can start doing right now on your phone. Everything in your phone is, I would say, good enough, if not really good, for starting a podcast. You don't need a high-end microphone like this one. You don't need all this fancy equipment like you see other podcast hosts doing. You just need to start with what's in your pocket. And I know some people are going to laugh at that concept, but it's honestly true. It honestly is really, really true. There's so many great tools, so many free great tools, might I add, on your phone right now that you can use in order to start a podcast. It's that simple. And speaking of starting a podcast, there's some things you might want to start out thinking about when you're going to be starting your first episode. Number one is, where you're going to host it. That's going to be the biggest thing. There's a lot of different hosting sites out there, and a majority of them are going to cost a little bit of money per month. Personally, I use Podbean. That's one of my favorite ones I've used in college, I've used now, and it has not failed me quite yet. So Podbean is the personal podcast platform site that I use to host my own podcast. Nice thing about Podbean is you also get a free website with it. Is it crazy? No, it's not like this uber customizable thing. You can add a few pages here and there, and probably more if you pay more, obviously. But obviously, the website that you get with it is honestly a really great starting point. It has all your social links where you can listen to the podcast, all the episodes below. So it's a really great starting point if you're really wanting to get in and not spend a ton of money on the hosting side of life. So Podbean is one I personally use, and from there, it's just kind of figuring out what you want to do. Do you want to talk about sports? Do you want to talk about baking? Do you want to talk about owning a home? Is it a vlog style of a podcast? It's just figuring out what category you want to be under. And don't be, what do you want to say? Don't be intimidated. That's the word I'm trying to use. I some of these words, I'm like, what am I trying to think of? Don't be intimidated by the amount of other podcasts that are out there and ones that are more successful than yours. I know, being personally, I deal with something called imposter syndrome. I don't want to say deal with it because it sounds like you have it from birth, but it's not the case. I think a lot of content creators, podcasters, including myself, you get wrapped up in this whole, I'm not where I'm at. I'm not where I thought I was going to be at this moment, at this time, with this podcast, with this project, whatever. I'm not getting enough views. I'm not getting enough likes. I'm not getting enough subscribes. It can be easy to get yourself wrapped up in all of that. Hold up one second. I am going to take a drink of water. This is another thing. Being prepared for a podcast is getting yourself a drink of water. So I'm going to do that right now. And by the way, I'm just waiting for that energy drink company to start sponsoring me. So if you're Ghost, if you're a representative of Ghost, I like Ghost, and I'm willing to talk. Hey, what's going on, podcast peeps? It is Tyler Brunner, the host and creator of Beyond the Broadcast, and I am beyond happy that you are enjoying today's episode. And if you are, and if you want to see more of Beyond the Broadcast, of course, the easiest way to support us is by following us on your preferred podcast platform and following us on all of our social channels. You can find those in the description of today's episode. All right, we got some more lo-fi hip hop and plenty of more Beyond the Broadcast coming up next. Coming into this content creation, podcasting, it's twofold, right? Anyone can start a podcast. That's the great thing, but that's also the downside if anyone can start a podcast. So you have to find ways in which to differentiate yourself from the crowd, but also not really worrying about that. You know what I mean? Whether it's a wrestling podcast, a pro wrestling podcast, or you're talking about tech, just be you. Don't worry about, trying to just be you. Be authentically you. And sprinkle in a little bit of that, magic, that podcast magic of, when that red light goes on, to just be, I don't know, I guess a higher version of yourself. Not really a higher version, that sounds wrong, but a more amped up version of yourself. You know what I mean? Me personally, this is what I'm like in front of the camera, in front of the mic. This is what I was like in radio broadcasting, so you got to be, a little bit more than yourself. You got to be a little bit more of a more energetic version of yourself. And, you got to have some form of communication skills a little bit, especially if you're doing interviews. And we'll talk about that in later episodes. There's so much to talk about on this topic, but just being authentically you. And you're going to win people over by being authentically you. Don't worry about being perfect. That's the other thing too, is that, I like my things to look a certain way. And I like to have my contents, my shots, everything look a specific way. And I've got to get out of my own way of trying to be perfect, because in all reality, you're not going to get everything perfect. And that's the case. You're going to be working on episode 1 forever. You know what I mean? So coming in with the mindset that you're not going to be perfect. Everything's not going to be set up exactly the way you want. the podcast isn't going to be exactly what you want. You're not going to get the numbers you exactly want from the get-go. But that's the beauty of it, because you get to see this hard labor and all this work you're putting into this podcast really pay off in the end. And that's the beauty of it. That's the thing that I like about this, is I like the behind the scenes stuff, getting in front of the camera. I have really trained myself. I'm still kind of training myself to be comfortable in front of the camera. That was always a struggle of mine, whenever I was doing anything with interview style stuff, whether I was interviewing someone else or I was doing videos like this where I'm in front of the camera by myself with no one else to bounce off of. It's just getting comfortable with all these things and enjoying the journey. That's what I really started to enjoy, because I get to watch this thing that I am really passionate about, and I get to see the numbers start to increase. And I get to enjoy the editing process like I always have. You know what I mean? So it's not for everybody. I'm going to say that much. While anyone can start a podcast, it's not for everybody. It really isn't. It's a lot of hard work to deliver a podcast every single week and to be on time with those podcasts. It's something that, again, is not for everybody. So, if you got a friend who started a podcast and you want to start a podcast, and maybe you get, 5 or 6 episodes in and you're like, not for me. That's okay. That's totally okay. There's no one here telling you you have to continue this podcast for the rest of your life. If you get to the point where you're just burnt out and you can't find the time to do it, then that's okay. That's totally okay. I don't think people are going to be running with pitchforks and torches to your house saying and demanding that next podcast episode. So, I'd say, if you are feeling burnt out about that, take a break. Be transparent. That's the whole, going back to that whole point of just being transparent, being you. If you need to take a break away from the podcast, I don't think people are going to be that upset about it. Maybe some people are. There's internet trolls out there. You know what I mean? There's going to be haters. There's going to be people who are just negative Nancy's. That's going to happen. That's already happened with my show. But it's okay. As long as you are feeling fulfilled and as long as you are putting out the best product that you absolutely can, that's okay. Take a break. We're humans. We're not meant to be working 24/7, 365. You know what I mean? You got to take those breaks. And of course, within all that, you got to structure things as well. I really have, in the last few weeks, fallen off a little bit when it comes to editing and really devoting a lot of really good, solid time to editing. The last few weeks have been a little bit difficult just because I am moving here very, very soon. And so, on top of packing and the finances and all that kind of stuff, I really have been struggling with finding a good amount of time to edit my podcast. And not saying that I haven't, made sure that they are quality, but it's just, sometimes it does get difficult, and if you have, a spouse, a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it might be, if you have a partner in your life or you have family or whatever you mean, or whatever you want to say, it is difficult to say, hey, I got to go edit a podcast for 2 hours out of the day. If it's 7 o'clock at night and you got to edit a podcast, you just got to find the time to do this, and if you really want this, there's going to be a lot of hard work put into it. So long story short, there's a lot to expect, especially for me, growing up, I had a YouTube channel. I am not going to tell you where you can find it because you probably can't, because all those videos have been privated for a very good reason. But if there's enough demand that you want to see some of these old videos, I'm more than happy to share. They're very embarrassing, but I'm more than happy to show my growth within the world of video content creation. But even with my podcast right now, I've been uploading a lot of short form content to my YouTube channel, to the TikTok page, Instagram, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. And I've gotten some dislikes on YouTube and some very weird comments in a lot of ways. And that's kind of the maturity that you have to bring forth, is to not allow those things to really bother you. You let it slide off. It's random people. They found you randomly and they're saying something that's on their mind. That's all that really is. And in the long run, Comments, negative comments, dislikes, it's all engagement at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It is a bad engagement, yeah, but it's not going to negatively impact your channel. Just because you get a dislike on a video doesn't mean you're going to, not get more subscribers in the future, or that your whole channel is now ruined because you've got 5 dislikes and 6 likes on a video. You know what I mean? There's a reason why that exists, and it's a good thing that it does exist, but it's not going to negatively impact your channel. So just try to not allow those negative things to affect you. One last thing that we want to talk about right before we get to the end of this podcast, because I don't want these to be too long. I don't want to take a lot of your time on the Beyond the Podcast. Really want this to be quick, bite-sized content, not an hour. I cannot talk personally for a whole hour, so I'm going to try to keep these episodes to around 25 minutes to half an hour, just talking about different topics on the podcasting journey, vlogging, what's going on in my life, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of what I want this to be. I want Beyond the Podcast to be Beyond the Podcast. That's the whole reason Beyond the Broadcast exists, is because personally, that's what I'm doing. I'm going beyond the broadcast. I'm stepping outside of broadcasting, and I'm doing something that I really haven't done. I haven't done an interview style podcast, so setting up interviews and doing all these things. Yeah, I'm used to, but it's a whole new ball of wax. So that's what I want Beyond the Podcast to be, is just one-on-one time. You and me hanging out, doing what we want to do. And hopefully in the future, whenever this podcast explodes and gets 1 billion views on each video, hopefully we'll have a Q&A session. That's kind of what I want this to eventually hopefully become, is more Q&A. We've got people asking questions about podcasting, content creation, my thoughts on, basketball, football, pro wrestling, whatever it might be. That's kind of what I want this to eventually become. Of course, it can't become this right now because this podcast is still growing and is still in the growing stages. So hopefully down the road, we can start to make this a Q&A session. That's what I would love this to be. So if you have an episode for the next edition of Beyond the Podcast, send them in. Put them in the comments of this episode, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Spotify, wherever you might be. Send them in the comments and let us know, or DM us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it might be. Let us know what questions you have about anything: content creation, podcasting, equipment. I'm a pro wrestling fan, as you could tell the last few episodes. We've had a pro wrestler, a pro wrestling ref, and a pro wrestling fan, all in the span of like 3 episodes. So, big pro wrestling fan. Of course, I'm so excited for WrestleMania 40. Speaking of that, we'll have Joe Pecoraro back on the show after WrestleMania to do a little bit of recap and to talk about the results, where hopefully, knock on wood, Cody finishes his story. I'm waiting for that. I have been waiting for that for the last 2 years. Let's just hope it happens this time. One last thing before we go. Got about 4 minutes left here on my timer. I've got a timer to my right so I don't go over the time limit. It's some resources I want to share with you guys. So if you're really starting and really want to start a podcast but don't know where to go, here are some resources I would suggest starting with to get your podcast off the ground. Number one is, of course, I talked about it. Podbean is a podcast hosting site. If you are on mobile, if I'm not mistaken, it got bought out by Spotify, but Anchor FM is a great free way to start your podcast. I've seen so many people start podcasts on Anchor, and it's a great way to get it off the ground. And of course, once you build up some money, if you want to say that, then you can obviously go into a paid service like Podbean. Another thing I would do if you're looking for some royalty-free photos and or media, Pixabay is your go-to. So it's Pixabay. I've been using Pixabay for a few years at this point, and they've got a ton of royalty-free resources that you can use. That is my go-to. There's also another one. Let me take a look here because I know I've got it on my PC here. There's another place, and I'm going to find it. There's another one called Pixels too, by the way. I'm going to look this up. Pixels, Pexels.com. Another free place for what do you want to say, for royalty-free videos and photos and stuff like that. But there was another site, and now I'm not going to find it in time because I do not know where in the world I put it. But there is a place online that's honestly just like Photoshop that's free. So you don't have to pay for an Adobe subscription. I'm all about free, if you can't tell. I am all about those free resources. I'm all about saving money. I'm all about making podcasting accessible to everybody. So I'm going to try to give y'all as many of these free resources as possible. So if I do find that Photoshop-esque site online that's for free, I will put that in the description of this episode, and all of these things will be in the description of this episode so that you can easily start making your podcast today. Another place I would highly suggest getting free, royalty-free music is Creator Mix. It's a bunch, I think it's 2 guys at this moment, but 2 guys who were on a mission to create music that can be used almost anywhere. Podcasting, YouTube, social media, clips, whatever it might be. I use Creator Mix a ton on the episode. Heck, our intro song is on Creator Mix. And even our little breaks that we have here on the show are from Creator Mix. So I highly suggest using them. Their library isn't the biggest at this point, but it is growing, and it is honestly really, really awesome. Another thing I would suggest is OBS Studio. So if you want to do a video podcast, OBS Studio is what I use to record everything for the video side of life. And I also do record the audio on there. If you are one that wants to record the video and audio separately, of course, you can do the video on OBS Studio, and then you can record the sound on a free app on the PC called Audacity. It's a very, very great audio editing app. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles like Audition does for Adobe, but Audacity, I almost mixed the two up there for a second. Audacity is such a great free audio recording tool that if you really want to do this stuff like on a PC or on a Mac, Audacity is the way to go. Bar none, Audacity is the way to go. Another couple of free things I'll tell you about is video editing software. There's 3 of them that I've used primarily during my time content creating. So number 1 is Premiere Pro, but of course, you gotta pay for that. So Premiere Pro is one of them. I have learned Premiere Pro inside and out. So of course, if you want to pay for the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, by all means, you can do that. A more simple audio editing software is Wondershare Filmora. Super intuitive, super easy to use. I believe they get a free version with a watermark, but you can buy a lifetime subscription. One-time payment, I think, is $70. So you get the license to use it however long you want to. The only downside is that you can't upgrade. So like say, I think we're on Filmora 11 right now. You can't upgrade to Filmora 12, which has its ups and its downs. But honestly, if you're looking to pay one price one time and have a video editing software forever, that's a great way to go. Alternatively, another really, really powerful video editing software is DaVinci Pro, DaVinci Resolve. I am now mixing softwares in my head. I'm recording this right now at 8:30 in the morning, so I'm a little bit discombobulated. But DaVinci Resolve is such a great free high-end video editing software. All you got to do is sign up for an account on DaVinci's website. Or excuse me, on Blackmagic's website. That's the company name. So if you go to Blackmagic, look up DaVinci Resolve, you fill out the form that you do, you'll say who you are, what you do, all that kind of stuff. It's a great, powerful, free tool to use. I think they just started, I think maybe a year ago, introduced a full editing suite. I mean, it literally walks you through the process of editing a video. And their color correction and their color grading tools are probably the best out there. I kid you not. Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve has the best color grading tools ever. I'm still getting better at color grading myself and color correction, but bar none, DaVinci Resolve is one of the best all-in-one video editing softwares that's free. So check it out. Of course, all of these links are going to be available in the episode description so that you can start creating some awesome things with your podcast, with content creation, whatever it might be, YouTubing. You can get started today with all of these links in the description below. So we're at the 30-minute mark, just about 29, 32, whatever you want to say. I'm going to say thank you so much as we wrap up today's episode. You know, I'm 7 episodes into this new venture in my life. I say new, we've been doing this since February. I think beginning of February was episode 1 with Jeff Blankman. So I would just suggest go back and listen to all the other episodes that we have had so far. You know, I've started to incorporate new things into each of them. Of course, make sure you follow us on social media. That's the easiest way we're going to grow this shindig and to get bigger and better guests every single time is by you following everything that we do on social media. We've started to produce some shorts, so I'm so excited to get those out into the public. I'm going back to some of the older episodes and pulling out clips for everyone to watch. We've got a couple from the James Beard episode. We've got a couple from the Clayton Van Horn episode, and so I hope that you enjoy those as well. Those, of course, are available Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, everywhere. And of course, like as always, all those links are going to be in the description. And one more thing I'm going to ask from you just before we say our goodbyes is just follow the podcast wherever you are listening to this, whether it's YouTube, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Yes, you can follow a podcast and get notified when new episodes drop, and leave a rating or review, whatever it's called, on your preferred podcast platform, because that's going to help us grow and get more listeners on the audio side. It's easy to, kind of listen to a podcast and not leave a review, but those reviews really do tell the story. Those get us to the top of the pages whenever you search for Beyond the Broadcast. That helps us grow the show, and it really just shows people that this podcast is what it is and it's quality. You know what I mean? That's going to help me out tremendously if you can leave that review or rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. All right, folks, this has been episode 1 of Beyond the Podcast. I cannot wait to see how this evolves over time. We've got plenty that we can talk about on this special edition of Beyond the Broadcast. So if you have anything you want to talk about, content creation, podcasting, pro wrestling, whatever it might be, send those questions in on our social media pages, to TikTok, Instagram, not Twitter. Don't got Twitter no more. Threads. There we go. Send them in using that hashtag Beyond the Broadcast, I guess. You know what? What kind of hashtag do we want to use? That's a good question. If you have any questions, send it to the social media pages, of course. You can DM us, leave a comment, whatever you want to do. But use the hashtag Beyond the Broadcast. I think that'll be easiest for right now. We'll develop a hashtag to use, I think, later. If you do have a question that you want to talk about or a topic you want to talk about, we'll develop that later. But for right now, if you want to ask a question or a topic for the next Beyond the Podcast, make sure you use that hashtag Beyond the Broadcast in the comments when you ask that question. And of course, we'll make sure to get to it in the next edition. All right, I think that's going to do it for me. Have a phenomenal Good Friday. Have a phenomenal Easter. Of course, tell the family that I say hi. And I guess this is going to be goodbye for this week. Next week, we're going to try to get another guest. Not too sure who we're going to do at this point, but we're going to try to get back into the interviews on this next edition of Beyond the Broadcast. My friends, my name is Tyler Brunner, and I hope you have a phenomenal Easter weekend. Enjoy yourselves, and don't forget to go beyond in life. All right, we will see you next Friday.